We now return to Let's Play Ace Attorney Chronicles. Joan Garadeb. And I'm a juror and such like. It sounds like even she doesn't know if she's a housewife or a maid or what anymore.
The court has decided your testimony is required in order to clarify matters in this case. Do you understand, madam?
Yes, my lord. You will tell the court everything that took place in your household on the evening in question. And I warn you, do not attempt to hide the truth.
Oh, dearie me. Chin up, Jody. Nothing to worry about now. Oh, it's me.
Oh, I didn't know you were here, John. Oh, goody.
It wasn't only you in the room on that day, old thing, was it? I rather think I ought to testify as well, don't you?
But what about your knee, dear?
Don't you worry about that. I hardly notice it. I'm not the sort of chap to leave a comrade to face distant...
Sorry, I'm really just trying to, on the fly, remember his voice.
I'm not the sort of chap to leave a comrade to face disciplinary action alone.
Oh, John.
I presume you are Mr. John Garadeb. Yes, sir. Former second lieutenant of the 3rd Regiment of the 4th Northumberland Fusiliers, sir. Seen my share of action and now living the quiet life, as it were.
The quiet life. Were you not engaged in an incendiary battle with your spouse on the day in question? Ah, well, yes, quite.
I believe this may represent a first in the proud history of the British court. Calling a juror to the witness stand is unprecedented. However, the court will hear your testimony now, juror number 4, and that of your husband. You will recount clearly and concisely the events in your home at the night of the incident, or at the time of the incident in question. Yes, sir, at once.
Battle of Garadeb. Yes, on the day you're referring to, the wife and I did have a bit of a skirmish. Can't recall the question. Can't recall the reason now. Knocked a candlestick over and set fire to the carpet. Soon had it out, though, and got the window open. Meanwhile, I was picking up everything I could to throw at him. I could find to throw at him. Jesus Christ, I can't read anymore. Plenty of knives around the place. Can't say I'd noticed if one or two went missing, I'm afraid. If that ballytheg in the victim's back really was one of ours, you will have a job proving it, I think.
It sounds as though it was quite the battlefield in your household that evening.
Although an entirely one-sided assault, it seems. The enemy caught us on the hop, sir. I had no choice but to dig in and take defensive measures.
To be honest, if the enemy had kept shelling us for another minute, we'd have been toast. Of course, a veteran such as myself is only too aware that on every battlefield you're just a gnat's whisker from death at any moment.
I was still talking about a marital quarrel here.
Well, I must say I'm dubious that this testimony will shed any light on the origins of this jackknife.
In combat, one's focus narrows such that surroundings are barely noticed. These witnesses may not be able to offer anything more than they have testified already. This may be a dead end. Forensics may well be right. Well, whatever the chances, we only have this last cross-examination to uncover the truth, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes, I'm afraid so.
Very well, counsel. Begin your cross-examination.
The day you're referring to, the wife and I did have a bit of a skirmish.
Hold it!
Can't recall the reason, can you? The reason is what you told us yesterday, I believe. Yes, that's right. If I remember correctly, it all started because of a note that was tucked into the pages of a book belonging to Mr. Garadeb. A rather passionate note, in fact, but Mrs. Garrideb found the note, discovering her husband's little secret. And she gave him a mighty number of slaps across the face for it, too.
What a sordid state of affairs.
Hell on earth. I say, when a chap says he can't recall things, it's common decency not to drag it all up. And besides, half of it was wide of the mark anyway. A likely story. These waters run very deep.
And what transpired next after these multiple blows to the face?
Knocked a candlestick over and set fire to the carpet. Soon had it out, though, and got the window open.
Hold it!
And the fire also spread to some items of furniture, didn't it?
The bookcase, my armchair, anything of mine, really. Just so happens there was some bathwater around that evening, so I sloshed that about to put it out.
What?
A most precarious situation you put yourself in.
Ours is a 3-story townhouse on the west side of the street, where the water main isn't connected yet.
I have to draw water from the public water pump during the day if you need any, you see.
The lodgers are always moaning that they can't get any water at night. Although that little mustached Japanese man buys water in bottles, I believe. Really, they were selling bottled water. The defendant, Mr. Natsume, you mean? Yes, he receives a stipend for his studies, you know, from his home country. Can you imagine being able to brew a pot of tea at all hours? He's obviously very well off. Have you actually seen the state of the man? I believe he uses all of his income to buy books.
Well, anyway, the point is, I was able to douse the fire with water, fortunately enough.
Meanwhile, I was picking up whatever I could to find to throw at him.
Hold it!
Even though the room was on fire. As far as I was concerned at the time, it was more important to extinguish my anger than the flames. When a woman wants to throw, she must throw. That is most certainly not true of Susato Takedown, Mr. Naruhodo. What? How did she know I was thinking that? So please cast your mind back and try to remember. Was a knife among the items that you threw at your husband that day? In all honesty, I don't recall. But I feel I must point out that I'm no monster. Let me see. Some bread, a cabbage, garlic, a towel, a sponge, a napkin.
Excuse me!
Do you have something to add, sir? The pipe. The pipe was thrown. Mr. Garrideb.
Don't shoot. Sorry, I beg your pardon?
Did your wife's remarks now just bring something to mind?
Nothing of any significance, no. Just that the barrage of projectiles the old thing launched in my direction was somewhat more solid than she implies. Books, bricks, the fire poker, I seem to recall. Ouch. And the woman's aim is uncanny.
What is she?
Good grief, woman, we're not at home now. This is a court of law.
Oh, dearie me. Ever so sorry, dear. What you even doing with a teapot in here? Honestly, John, I would never have thrown such things at you, obviously.
We'll take a look at this, then. How do you suppose that happened, Your pipe, sir? And this thing in my hand, as usual, at the time of the onslaught. Knocked it clean out with one of her soft projectiles, she did, yes. And when I went to pick the thing up, it was broken in two. I'd like to see a sponge do that sort of damage.
I see, your pipe was broken.
It would never have been sent flying unless it was hit by something pretty solid. Anyway, I've managed to bandage the thing up for now. You are one to exaggerate, aren't you, dear?
I wonder what we should make of this account. It could be important. The defense believes Mr. Garadeb's remarks just now to be of great significance.
Objection!
This war veteran's words can only tell us one thing. Betray a fiery wife, and pipes, as well as hearts, may be broken. A sentimental wisdom, perhaps, but hardly worthy of it, adding to the form of testimony.
Indeed, common sense, one might say. Might one? In that case, would you at least permit us to examine the pipe, sir?
Well, I don't see why not.
Oh, dearie me, there you go again, trying to ingratiate yourself with a young lady.
Very well, the court will accept the gentleman's pipe as evidence. The pipe has been entered into the court record.
I hope I didn't speak out of Mr. Turn, Naruhodo. We shall see. Apparently it fell on the floor during a domestic dispute. There's also a chip out of this. What is this? Pottery shard. That. Oh, something just twinkled inside the chamber of the pipe there. The tip of the knife. Yes, I saw it. Something stuck in there, I think. Let's turn it over and give it a shake. What's this? It's a tiny fragment of metal. It looks like the tip of a blade or something. The tip of a blade. Surely it couldn't be.
A fragment of metal has been entered into the court record.
Is this not tampering with the evidence? It looks to be in a sorry state with that bandage around it, doesn't it? But for some reason it feels slightly ominous to me, like it's trying to shout out a warning. Probably because it's the same blue as Mr. Garadeb's dressing gown. I suppose it must have considerable sentimental value to Mr. Garadeb, given that he's gone to the trouble of repairing it like this. Either that, or he can't afford to replace it. Okay, but can we look at this chip here? There's a small nick out of the bowl here. Look, it appears to have been made relatively recently. See how there are little scrapes and dents all over it? It's clearly a well-loved pipe. Yes, you're right. It seems to me recently that being well-loved goes hand in hand with getting some battle scars. This particular nick is catching my eye, though, because it's clearly new. Yeah, okay. Threw the knife, caught the knife on the pipe, broke the tip off. This is the tiny piece of metal we found in the chamber of Mr. Garadeb's pipe. It looks like the tip of a blade or something. The tip of a blade. Is something wrong, Mr. Naruhodo? I don't really know. It's just something niggling me, but I can't quite put my finger on what it is. Perhaps in that case, it would be wise to examine some of the other pieces of evidence again? Okay, well, you heard them. Do it again, because I'm so stupid I can't understand what I'm looking at here and figure it out on my own. Oh, look here, Mr. Naruhodo, just at the tip. A small piece of the blade appears to be missing. Wait, part of it's missing? I could be wrong, but I've just got a feeling. You remember this? Ah, that's the tiny fragment of metal that we found inside Mr. Garadeb's pipe. Yes, and just maybe. Oh my, it's a perfect fit! Somehow I just knew it. Okay, are we finally done? I was just feeling rather disappointed for you that your request was turned down. Oh no, it's fine. Thanks to Sasato-san, we have some new evidence to work with. We should examine it carefully. This has been done.
Well, thank you for that rebuttal, Mr. Garadeb. Now, if we could return to the crux of the matter. What can you tell the court about the knife used to attack the victim?
Plenty of knives round our place. Can't say I'd notice if one or two went missing, I'm afraid.
Hold it!
Sorry? Would you care to elaborate? Nothing to say, really. Rather partial to the spot of carving, you see. Pipes and whatnot. Fishing at tackle. You know the sort of thing. It's a passion we both share. I like to carve little wooden trinkets too. And then there's my leatherwork.
I'm sorry to say, we're always losing knives about the place, and we have dozens of the things.
They sell them at the market sometimes, 20 for the price of 19. Needless to say, I snap them up. John prefers to use 2 knives at meal times too, instead of knife and fork.
Now, Joe, we don't want people thinking I'm some kind of savage.
Ah,
Here we go again with the scaldings.
why are they being so evasive? I imagine it's because they don't want to believe it. They can't bear the thought that it might have been one of their knives that injured the victim. Which is entirely understandable, of course, but still.
Go on with your testimony. Witnesses.
Excuse me.
So,
If that ballet thing in the victim's back really was one of ours, you'd have a job of proving it, I think.
Hold it!
So you have no intention of admitting it was your knife unless we can produce proof? Really? Even though there is no other credible possibility of Mr. Natsume is innocent?
Objection!
You forget, my Nipponese friends, that it is yet to be established that the accused is not responsible for the attack. As if I could forget. If only there was some way to know who had handled the knife. But I suppose wizardry like that is just a dream. Perhaps you're thinking of fingerprinting, Mr. Naruhodo? A what? You mean it's not a dream? That sort of wizardry really exists? Whenever people touch anything, they leave behind a unique pattern from their skin, or so they say. But I can't see anything. There are already countries in the world where these so-called fingerprints can be used as evidence. Lord Strongheart is currently discussing the matter at the Ministry of Justice.
yes, I believe we are rapidly approaching an era of scientific methods of investigation.
For now, she'll have to find an alternative method of proving our assertion. That this knife found in the victim's back was originally in Mr. and Mrs. Garadeb's house. If only I could transplant this whole incident to several years in the future. That's the extent of their testimony, isn't it? What do you think, Mr. Naruhodo? Well, I think we've heard all this before, to be honest. Can't say I'm particularly confident that we'll be able to prove anything new from this testimony. But in this cross-examination, it's absolutely essential that we establish how this knife came to be at the scene of the incident. Yes, I know. I think we've already got this in the bag, folks. I'm sure both of them must be feeling very worried. Worried that it was in fact a knife belonging to one of them that caused the victim's injury. If we could find even a tiny shred of evidence to support that theory, it would clinch this trial for us. It would explain everything. Yes, it would. So, for Saseki-san's sake, we must find that last crucial piece of evidence we just heard. On the day you're referring to, knocked the candlestick over, picking up whatever I could find, plenty of knives around our place. If it had been in the victim's back, you'd have a job of proving it. I guess. I don't know which of these things to show, but...
Objection!
Mr. Garadeb, could I ask you to take a look at this, please?
You can ask, but I can't see a belly thing.
You can't?
They used to call me Dead-Eye Deb back in the regiments, of course, but that was some time ago now. Even when I'm trying to enjoy a large print book by the fire these days, I struggle to tell a B from a D and a P from a Q, to be honest.
Oh, he does. Dearing me, it's rather wearing being asked about every other letter and every other word. You must be very does-he? What is that? Tiny scrap of metal? Yes, almost certainly from the tip of a blade. And what may appear at first to be just a tiny scrap is in fact a crucial piece of evidence. Interesting. And where did the defense come by this evidence? was lodged in the chamber of Mr. Garrideb's pipe.
My pipe, you say? By Jove, I wonder how that got there. And what precisely does this fragment of metal signify, Counsel? Are you suggesting that it is in some way related to the matter of the stabbing on Briar Road?
I am. What? When put together with another piece of evidence already in the court record, I believe this tiny fragment of metal will unravel the whole truth of this case, my lord. I didn't notice he's got a burn mark around his butt.
You appear rather confident in that extraordinary statement, Counsel. Very well then, present the pertinent evidence to the court. What evidence, when paired with this fragment of metal, allegedly reveals the truth of this entire case?
Take that!
This is the knife that was found in the victim's back. If you look closely, you will see that there is a small piece at the tip of the blade that is missing. A common issue with the inferior blades sold at unsavory street markets. Criminals who use them regularly leave the tips lodged in their victims' bones.
And what of this particular knife?
No doubt its tip has suffered a similar fate, now languishing somewhere near the spine of the victim.
Objection!
No, that's not the case. The tip of this particular knife's blade is the very fragment of metal we discovered in the chamber of Mr. Garrideb's pipe.
Ah. Oh. Good grief. Lord Van Zeeks?
I don't believe it. The knife from the crime scene and this fragment of metal are a perfect match.
Good golly gosh. Order, order! Is this some sort of Eastern sorcery?
This is no magic, my lord. This is a miracle.
A miracle?
So Van Zeeks has figured it out, has he?
Counsel, explain this extraordinary coincidence at once.
Yes, my lord. The crucial point we have to ask ourselves here is when did the fragment of metal find its way inside Mr. Garrideb's pipe? Something that was clarified for us in the most recent witness testimony. And the thing in my hand as usual at the time of the onslaught. Knocked it clean out with one of her soft projectiles, she did. Never been sent flying unless it was hit by something pretty solid.
Oh, dearie me.
During the argument between these two that occurred just as the victim was on the pavement below, Mrs. Garrideb flung this knife at her husband. However, the knife missed Mr. Garrideb, instead striking the pipe in his hand at the time, which caused the tip to break off, of course.
Lord.
Yes, and that is when the tiny tip of the blade found its way inside Mr. Garrideb's pipe.
The chances of that are 1,000,000 to 1.
And yet, there's no other credible explanation for how the tip of the blade ended up in your pipe. Then, after losing its tip, the knife ricocheted off the pipe and flew out of the open window. In short, this knife, which fell from the window of the Garrideb's house, is the very same knife that struck the victim in the middle of the back on the street below.
Oh, gosh, oh dear. Oh, no!
Objection!
A full-bodied theory, I'd give you that. A complex bouquet of seemingly trivial points, plausibly arranged to create a most passable vintage. Allow me to toast my learned friend's characteristically Nipponese approach to bottling his argument. Sorry? But, after all, it is just a theory. The bottle, I fear, is corked. Because, you see, it's spoilt by an insurmountable inconsistency. An insurmountable... What?
Van Zeeks, explain yourself. What is this inconsistency you claim to have identified?
An inconsistency in the simplest nature, my lord. The victim was found with the knife planted in the middle of her back. Yes, in her... Ah. That's right, you silly little man. And now, Jono, thing, what are you getting so excited about? Let us consider the basic facts of the case once more. The victim was walking along the pavement before being stabbed in the back and falling to the ground. If the knife that struck her hand had fallen from above, there's no possible way it could have planted itself in the victim's back. And I think I already explained this in the last episode.
Order! Order!
Quite right, you see. That's exactly right. If the knife had fallen on her from above, it would have struck her on the top of her head. Well, it's lost for words, look. Oh, I knew it. Whatever locked is there in the first place? Although, what really did happen?
It would appear the defense has made rather a spectacular blunder.
If a theory has even one inconsistency, it cannot stand. Your theory, my learned friend, is history. We were so close. I could see the truth. I was so sure we were on the right track. But now the way's been blocked completely by just one simple inconsistency. Or, in other words, we simply need to eliminate the one inconsistency and the theory will stand. Mrs. Sato. You mustn't worry, Mr. Naruhodo. You were just caught off guard, that's all, and your mind went blank. But if the path you were on is indeed correct, then a way will present itself. The key to this is in the court record, I'm sure. All the information you need is there. It seems you have nothing to say, my Nipponiese friend. Well, your silence speaks volumes. A tacit acceptance that your theory is fatally flawed.
Objection!
This inconsistency doesn't mean I was on the wrong track. It means that I need to sharpen my mind and dig deeper for the truth. It's a test. Yes. If the knife fell on the victim from above, there's no way that it could have hit her in the middle of her back. Under normal circumstances, that is. You implying?
Counsel?
There is a piece of evidence in the court record that can explain this inconsistency. It can explain how the knife that fell from above could have pierced the victim's back. We already have the answer.
My goodness. Utter madness. Surely this must be the last time. Counsel, present the evidence of which you speak.
This is the last inconsistency, the final piece in the puzzle. If I can successfully make sense of this, the truth will be laid bare at last. The evidence that explains how the falling knife became lodged in the victim's back. It's got to be this.
Take that!
This, the fourth book found at the scene. This is the final piece of evidence the defense will present.
Defense book? Is that not Mr. Garadeb's book?
Yes, and to understand its significance, we have to consider how it came to be at the scene in the first place. This photographic print clearly shows the book in question, and the victim holding it in her hand. But as we all now know, it was a police constable that put the book between her fingers like that.
Quite so, as part of his wholesale transplanting of the crime scene to the opposite side of the road.
It's true, however, as part of his testimony, Constable B made an extremely enlightening statement on that point. What made you place that book in the victim's hand? Oh, well, sir, that's because that's how I found it. When we first ran over to the scene, the victim was already holding the book. So when I moved everything, I made sure it was still in her hand. In other words, the victim had already picked the book up of her own volition. And clearly, that must have been before she suffered the knife wound.
Well, I should say so. After being attacked with a knife, I don't imagine she'd have been doing much of anything.
So the question becomes, why did the victim have that book in her hand?
But, by jingo, I think I'm beginning to see what may have happened now.
Oh, dearie me. We know that the book fell from the top floor of the Garadeb household onto the pavement below, at precisely the moment that the victim was walking past. Yes, and at exactly that moment, the young woman was walking along the street in the light fog, when all of a sudden, a book fell right in front of her. The book I threw. Yes, Mrs. Garadeb, and what do you think the woman did? What would you do if you were walking along and suddenly a book landed in front of you on the pavement? Well, I really can't imagine it, but I suppose she might have reached down and picked the book up. Yes, that is exactly what the woman in fact did. She picked up the book. Oh, heavens! And when the woman reached down to pick the fallen book up, what position would her back have been in? That's right, facing the sky, completely and utterly defenseless. Then, in the very next moment, while the woman was still bent over picking up the book, the next object fell from the room above, the jackknife, straight into the middle of her back. And at that same time, walking by chance directly behind Miss Green, was the defendant, Mr. Soseki Natsume. Okay, hold on a minute, that's an inconsistency though, because if he was coming from the east side, he would not have been behind her at any given point, unless he was at that moment crossing the street as well. So we're not done with this goddamn story, are we?
Well, I never.
It appeared to Mr. Natsume the woman simply collapsed on the floor. In the dark and the fog, he didn't see the knife falling on her from above. From the other direction, the constable and his wife saw no one but the victim and her apparent attacker. But they would have been coming from the left. There's still an inconsistency here.
So there never was a real culprit to run from the scene in the first place.
No, this was nothing more than a series of unlikely events that culminated in an unfortunate accident. But why did he drop the book then? And that is the real truth behind this case. I don't think that's true. Actually, there's too many inconsistencies yet. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Garadeb? The very first time you showed me that knife, I had my suspicions. I wondered if perhaps it might have been something like that. There, old bean. Poor Mrs. Garadeb. Of course, I never meant for anything of the sort to happen, but it was all my fault, wasn't it? I take full responsibility. I let my anger get the better of me. I threw that book. And I threw the knife as well. John, dear. It's all right, I know. I'm ever so sorry. Truly. I'm sorry.
Lord Van Zeeks, what news of Mrs. Garadeb?
She's been taken to the infirmary. It would appear that today's events had left her in an especially flustered state. However, I believe she will recover in due course. There is no cause for concern.
Yes, unbeknownst to themselves, they caused what could have easily have been a near terrible tragedy. They shall have to prepare themselves for the consequences of their actions.
There's some good news, however, my lord. I've just had word from the hospital where the victim is being treated. She's awake, she's going to testify, and no, that's not what happened. Dun dun dun! Her condition is improving steadily, and the doctor believes she will regain consciousness soon. It's strange. We've been talking about the victim all this time, but we've never once met her. Oh, wonderful. The woman is out of danger, it seems. Yes, that is good news.
So, Mr. Saseki, Natsume.
Yes.
On behalf of my fellow countrymen, I would like to take this opportunity to beg your pardon, sir. You came from your distant eastern homeland to study our great British culture, and have been repaid with immeasurable unkindness. Please accept our heartfelt apologies.
No, it is me who should be begging your pardon. Oh no, Mr. Natsume. That evening, when the young woman just collapsed on the pavement before my eyes, I jumped to the wrong conclusions again in my confusion.
What conclusion, sir?
I was sure that the woman was dead. Yes, Constable Beat said the same thing, didn't he? He thought she'd been killed too. I suppose she must have looked completely lifeless. It's been about a year since I arrived in Great Britain now, but I still can't get used to life here. I can't relax. I'm sure there are evil spirits lurking in the fog. They're haunting me. Poor Saseki-san. His imagination really has got the better of him. Yes, poor man. So when it happened, I thought the young woman had been taken by the fog spirits. I should never have dropped my books like that and run away. I should have called for help, for a doctor, for the police. Instead, I've managed to create a rift in the relationship of trust between our two empires. And for that, I am truly sorry.
One could indeed say that some sort of mischievous spirit has been at work here, I think. One that created a chain of unfortunate mishaps. We were befooled by this spirit and led to false conclusions. But thanks to Lord Van Zeeks and our young lawyer here from the east, that chain has now been broken and the spirit exorcised. I heartily commend you both.
Oh.
Now then, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Yes, my lord.
In concluding this trial, I must ask one last time for your decisions regarding the defendant's culpability. Are you ready to present your findings to the court?
As the foreman of this jury, I can assure you we've reached a fair and just conclusion. I do declare the truth can be extremely cruel at times. Well, I didn't suspect the woman next to me, that's for sure. Sitting in for the Bane once she's out of action, you know. But I know what her decision would be. Does this mean I'll finally be able to get out of here and start work? Well, it's about time.
I have a corker of a story to tell the grandchildren when I get home, would I? Very well. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I hereby demand all final decisions. Mr. Foreman.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty is a bit of an accent there.
Very well, Mr. Saseki, Natsume, I hereby pronounce you not guilty. And finally, Mr. Natsume. Oh, yes, Lord, sir. You are now a free man once more. It is my hope that you will continue to further your education in British culture, and may you never again be brought before me.
Oh, yes, sir, of course. On my life, I swear I'll never set foot in a courtroom again. I'm transported to tears.
Thank you, counsels. Court is adjourned.
But if it's anything like Mr. Macklemore, he's gonna die. The Old Bailey Defendant's Antechamber. Oh, Locum. Wait, you mean me? Of course. Is there another Locum here? Is there even one? Compared to the original Locum student, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire, your name has become rather short, hasn't it? What's wrong with using my actual name? Oh, at last! Oh, at last I'm free! I'm free! Joyful, joyous, jubilant, jubilation! Heady, hearty, happiness, hurrah! Oh, I am pleased. Mr. Natsume is delighted. Would it be so hard just to say that, then? Locum, you did it. You saved me from the brink. Well, what happened to the poor woman was in no way your fault, after all. I'm just glad everyone can see that now. No, not that. Lovely, loyal Locum lawyer. Yes? I mean, as I said before, I have just never got used to life here in Great Britain. Every time I look over my shoulder, I see foreigners. I see towering brick buildings. From high up windows, I see them looking down on me, laughing. Look at that little hunchback. Oh dear, I'm sure it's all in your head, Mr. Natsume. But today, you, Locum lawyer, gave my gloom the boot. You stood firm behind that baronial bench before all those babbling British. You battled to the bitter end, laying bare the baffling truth. And when I beheld the blinding fireworks among the beams of the Bailey's roof, I bellowed, "Behold the best barrister ever born!" That's very flattering, and we're very pleased for you, and I really hope that didn't just screw up everything. My mic tends to pick up that noise sometimes, and so there's probably just a bunch of pop, 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 pop. Anyway. This has given me a wonderful anecdote to recount to my old friends back in Japan. An anecdote? Is that what's to become of all my hard work? Ah, there you are, my dear fellows. I apologize for keeping you waiting. I rose late this morning. Oh, Mr. Sholmes, what a pleasure to see you. I see I am here not a moment too soon. A disaster has been averted, I'm glad to say. Oh? The trial should begin presently, Mr. Naruhodo, and I wish you the very best of luck. It's just finished. What? No. Then my haste was in vain? Ah, it's you, Herlock Sholmes. Oh, have we met, sir? This is Mr. Natsume, the man you had arrested, Mr. Sholmes. Ah, I see. I failed to recognize you at first. Our previous encounters have taken place in the gloom, either of your bleak lodgings or that prison cell. I simply couldn't place that curious face in the light. Charming. This is all your fault, Herlock Sholmes. You're the reason I had to go through this terrible ordeal. I'm going to give you a piece of my mind. My apologies, sir, but I assure you I have placed you now. You're the fellow who abandoned that poor young lady and ran off, are you not? Ah. Had she been taken to hospital more urgently, I feel perhaps she would have regained consciousness by now. Oh. But it was unavoidable, I'm sure. We are but human after all. Anyone would have been shaken by such an experience. I do feel very badly about how I behaved. Well, never mind. Now then, what was it you wanted to say to me, sir? Nothing. priceless. Oh, I am sorry, really. But that was quite priceless. Poor Soseki-san. Still, on the bright side, you've had an extremely entertaining experience without paying a penny. And it would seem you were not even found guilty. But there is no bright side. Whatever do you mean, Mr. Natsume? Even after this, I'm still cursed by the spirits, and now by the Reaper. Ah, Lord Van Zieks, I haven't forgotten, you know, what facing that man in court means. Even if you're found not guilty, you're still doomed. It will be all right, Mr. Natsume. If the Reaper appears trying to make trouble, I will protect you. Yeah, okay, here we go. With a perfectly executed Susato takedown. Much as I like being turned on my head, a bit of warning might be nice next time, Miss Susato. So, Mr. Natsume, what do you intend to do now? You mentioned something about recounting your experiences to your friends back in Japan? Yes, I intend to return to my homeland soon. Oh. It has already been a year since I arrived here in Great Britain. I've visited universities, libraries, bookshops. I've been honored with the tutelage of professors. I've learned so much about the wealth of literature here and the city it has shaped. And I've come to realize that it is my calling to sail home and tell my fellow countrymen about it. It's very touching, Mr. Natsume. Or, in perhaps less veiled terms, wish to withdraw halfway around the world, escape the terror of the Reaper's curse. That's not it at all. The more I learn of literature, the more this strange feeling claws at my insides. I feel compelled to return to my roots and attempt to pen a work of my own. Oh, I see. A work of literature by Soseki-san. Could be an interesting read. I'm sure there's a reference in there that I don't get. And what about Miss Susato and yourself, Mr. Naruhodo? Sorry? What about us? Will you return to Japan alongside your mustached companion? Why would we? Sorry, I'm Japanese lit. Oh, what do you know? Natsume Soseki, Japanese novelist. Best known for his novels Kokoro, which I've read. I actually read that in university. Okay. He's a real guy. A week has not yet passed since we arrived in London. And only now does it feel as though we have finally found our feet. And you're... sorry. And you're accommodated in a hotel at present, are you not? Oh, that's right. But we need to find lodgings before it bankrupts us. I've calculated we can only afford another 10 nights before our entire budget is exhausted. Well, if Natsume is going home, I guess we're moving there. Well then, you could take my lodgings. Oh, the windowless room? But what it lacks in windows, it more than makes up for with a floor, a ceiling, and walls. Great. And, of course, I'd be happy to leave behind the accursed evil spirit. Oh my, an evil spirit? Oh yes. It tries to suffocate you while you sleep. There must be a cat. Oh, it is the cat. Yeah, there was a cat. It's an infallible wake-up call. We'll think about it, if that's all right. Perhaps I can offer a more welcome alternative. Would you consider taking lodgings with me? Oh, really? Well, a vacancy has conveniently presented itself. Oh no! What's-her-face has left. Though it is up in the attic, I might add. Are you sure it isn't just a storage loft? I spoke with the landlady this very morning on the matter of price, and Iris is cleaning the room as we speak. You must come at once. I presume you have no luggage to speak of? Oh, this is simply wonderful. What an honor to be invited to take lodgings in the great detective's office's attic. I'm too overcome for words. So suggesting we look elsewhere is out then. Then it's settled. Iris will prepare a welcome dinner this evening. And you must come too, Mr. Natsume. I insist. I don't know what to say. Thank you, and yes. Wonderful. Then I'll go and complete the paperwork for your formal release, Mr. Natsume. I shan't take long. Somebody's happy. Locum, I knew that you wouldn't let me down. I'm truly delighted to have met you here in London. Likewise, Mr. Natsume. It's been a privilege meeting you too. It's a shame that we're going to have to say goodbye so soon. Well, I've come to realize that I belong in Japan. But Locum, we'll meet again one day. Yes, I'm sure. And hopefully by then, I'll be a successful lawyer. Hopefully by then, I'll be a successful author. Well, my dear fellow, our carriage appears to have arrived. Shall we go, Mr. Naruhodo? Yes, Mr. Sholmes. I will doubt Mr. Natsume will be released in time for dinner this evening. And so, with Soseki-san's innocence successfully established, we rode with Mr. Sholmes to what was to become our new home, 221B Baker Street. Okay, we'll play this for just a little bit longer, assuming that the chapter is going to end here after some dialogue. So this is to be our new office. Yes, our office? I rather like the sound of that. Me too. It's simply wonderful, isn't it? I hope you can see this, Kazuma. It's only a small step, but I'd like to think we're getting a little closer to your dream now. So, my dear fellows, do you like the place? Mr. Sholmes. Yes, thank you so much. It's a delightful room, Mr. Sholmes. I simply adore it. Good, I'm pleased to hear it. Iris and I are delighted to welcome you. I hope everyone's hungry. It's nearly time for dinner. We'll eat as soon as Mr. Natsume arrives. We have a lot to celebrate. Iris, you must let me help you. All right then, Susie. You can be in charge of the salad. Splendid. So, Mr. Naruhodo, how does it feel to have your own office in the capital? It's very exciting, actually. I can't help wondering what adventures await us. Those were precisely my sentiments when I first established my office at these premises. Until I discovered the dark truth about the city of London, that is. Sorry? London is a glorious place, full of wonder, opportunity, prosperity, and mirth, but the brightest of lights casts the darkest of shadows. Shadows? What do you mean? Well, I believe you're well aware of the murkiness that lies behind London's facade already. So, once again, Mr. Naruhodo, welcome to London. Not ominous at all for a game that's about to be over. There's, of course, the sequel. It will be attached and included in this, so we're almost halfway through the entire game. Of course, at the time, I had no idea of the significance of those words Mr. Sholmes so casually spoke. But it wasn't long before my turn came to lift the facade and see the true depth of the murk that lay behind it. You suppose we'll be going after the Ripper? Either the Ripper or Moriarty, right? Or whatever his made-up name Do you suppose it was McGilded? Do you suppose they've changed it to McGilded? Because they've changed Holmes and Watson. I feel like McGilded is not dead, right? He can't be. He's got to be the villain. Sure. All right. The Hound of the Baskervilles. But that's not what we'll be doing next, because I know there is an interlude that comes after this one. So we'll be doing that next time.